We picked up this sense in the industry that the industry is at an inflection point, a growing interest in the use of tokenization specifically for collateral management. Can we move various kinds of collateral on a blockchain as a way to speed up that whole process and make it vastly more efficient? There have been some developments that really accelerated our interests. Last fall, we saw the Global Markets Advisory Committee of the CFTC taking a deep dive into the subject and issuing some recommendations. We saw the DTCC doing some experiments and pilots that seemed to be quite successful. We saw Eurex here in Europe launching a kind of a program to move collateral inside with its clearinghouse. And then we saw even more recently both ICE and CME making announcements in this space. And so we decided now is the time for us to talk about this issue, describe the benefits, and some of the considerations that we all need to think about before we actually adopt it at scale.
What are the most compelling benefits of tokenization for collateral management?
If you think about our industry, the first question they're going to ask is, do the benefits of this technology outweigh the costs? A lot of costs, and there have been a lot of failed attempts at using this technology before, so naturally there's going to be some skepticism. I think what we're hearing from our members, those that have really explored this technology, is that it has to do with both the mobility of collateral and the availability of collateral. On the mobility side, especially with non-cash collateral, when you're moving government bonds from one time zone to another, from one clearinghouse, out of the clearinghouse, into the clearinghouse, it can take sometimes days for that collateral to move. Whereas if you can put a token onto a blockchain that represents that same asset, it could be moved in almost real time. And that opens up tremendous opportunities for greater efficiency and risk reduction for in the movement of collateral. That's the mobility piece. The other piece is availability, which relates to this problem we've long had, which is on a banking holiday, the markets might still be operating, but it can't really move collateral because it's tied to the banking system. Good Friday is a good example in the US, but there's plenty of other situations like around the world. So this would allow the whole clearing and settlement process to keep up with trading hours and perhaps also even go to 24/7, even on weekends when the banking system is closed. That doesn't mean necessarily we're endorsing 24/7, but we do think this technology could help with that transition if that's where we go.
What are the implications of 24/7 trading for market participants and clearinghouses?
It might look attractive for certain brokers that are focused on retail traders because you can all see that retail does operate around the clock. But it's a huge lift from an operational perspective, from a risk management perspective. I think you're going to see FIA as a trade association hosting discussions on this to kind of air out the different issues. So we're not necessarily endorsing that or recommending it. However, if markets move in that direction, if trading is going to occur on weekends, then the rest of the process needs to keep up. And so that's really what we see tokenization is fitting into that, allowing collateral to move at the same speed as trading.
What are the main regulatory hurdles?
This is absolutely something that is emerging in many different jurisdictions. And one of the challenges that any global firm has, and a lot of our members are, is that they've got to operate in all those jurisdictions. They've got to comply with the rules in every jurisdiction. It's going to be a different issue in each place. Specifically with the US, where I think we're going to see a lot of movement this year. We have new legislation coming through Congress. I think the Senate just passed a bill that sets a regulatory framework for stablecoins. There's more bills coming through. So we're going to need to watch that legislation and see how it affects the rules that apply to derivatives. We actually did a study ourselves. We asked a bunch of our members to form a working group to look at the CFTC rules and say, is there something in there that needs to be addressed, changed, revised? They came out with the answer that actually no. The CFTC rulebook right now is actually pretty well suited for us to move down this road if it's limited to non-cash collateral that's already on the list of being acceptable by a clearinghouse. Bitcoin, no, that would be different. Stablecoins, no, different. But a money market fund, government bond, anything that's on that list today, there's no real regulatory issue there. There are a lot of legal issues that need to get worked out. There's revisions to the bankruptcy code. So remember, at the end of the day, what's the collateral there for? It's there for when someone's taken a very large loss. You need that collateral to make sure the contracts perform. And you've got to make absolutely sure that there's going to be no interruption in that process because of bankruptcy court filing. Will the fact that a traditional asset's been wrapped in new technology change its legal status? Not sure yet. We're going to have to look at that. And not just here, but in every jurisdiction where you want to apply this technology.
What FIA initiatives support tokenization understanding?
We definitely think education is absolutely critical. Having talked with a lot of different firms, having listened to some of the discussions here during the IDX, it's clear that people are in very different places, ranging from, barely concealed hostility to unbridled enthusiasm. So we've got a big range here. You may remember similar kinds of dispersion when electronic trading first emerged on the horizon. There were people dead set against it and people that said, that's the future. So we have people in this kind of place right now. And the second thing I would say is, it's unlike electronic trading, one will not replace the other. We suspect that both will exist at the same time, and different organizations will adopt it at different rates. So we think that it's really helpful for us to provide a platform for discussion, like at a show like this or the Expo in Chicago. But we also think it might be helpful to demonstrate the technology. We're not sure quite how that might work, but for example, what if we did some kind of exercise where people took on various roles and said, let's see what happens when we try to move this asset here. What happens if we liquidate that there? So everyone can see how would this technology work in a stress scenario, for example.
Why does the FIA recommend starting with highly liquid assets?
A committee of really expert people from the industry under the, I guess we'd say the authority of the Global Markets Committee of the CFTC, looked at that very question, and their answer was, that's where we should start. They're the experts. It's a great recommendation. We're adopting their guidance. But second, if you think about it, why would you want to backstop a clearing system with an illiquid asset that you cannot liquidate in the middle of a stress scenario? It's the whole purpose of the clearing system is to be incredibly resilient, no matter what's going on in the market. And so you want to have super liquid assets where there's never any doubt that you can use them to convert them to cash, make them as liquid as possible with the minimum necessary haircut. It's risk management.
What feedback have you received from clearinghouses, brokers, and other stakeholders?
Some people have said, well, I told you so. So I take that as a vindication we're on the right track. But there's also been, I think, a lot of people that are just coming to terms with this and trying to understand what exactly we're recommending. And I think beyond that, people are wondering, okay, fine, you've laid out this case pretty clearly, but what are the next steps? How do we get from here to there? My understanding is that Eurex will go live within the next 4 to 5 weeks with their collateral on the blockchain, collateral on this network project, which is not a pilot, it's not a test, it's in production. They have already said, and I think JP Morgan confirmed it a little bit earlier today, that JP Morgan is going to be there on day one using this platform to move collateral into Eurex clearing. So that's one case example. In the case of CME, they made an announcement, I think in March, that they're going to be partnering with Google. They said they've begun exploring that technology, they're testing it out this fall, and they plan to go live sometime next year. I actually spoke with them a few weeks ago. They said, yes, we're still on track. So there's another example. Beyond that, I think you're also seeing some very real-world examples in markets that are adjacent to ours. So not ETD, not uncleared, but like repo markets. And I think the best example I can think of is Broadridge has launched a platform for doing intraday repo on a blockchain. Last year, which is the most recent time where I have the actual data, they were moving around more than $1 trillion notional value of repo per month on that platform. Again, real money, real platform, it's real world. So we're starting to see these things happening. I think as more firms get involved and see what it does and how it works, the more you'll see this snowball.
What timeline do you foresee for widespread adoption?
I'm going to quote Don Wilson. This morning was speaking at IDX, and he said something very funny. All the way back in 2012, some of his partners said, Don, this Bitcoin thing is very interesting. Forget about the coin, but look at the technology. And what Don said on stage, he said, I keep thinking that it's going to happen quickly. And yet here we are 13 years later, and it still hasn't happened. It always takes longer than we expect. I think the same thing's true here. To mobilize all these different people, this entire industry, it's going to be very, very challenging. It's going to take a long time. And I think for good reason. There's an immense amount of value moving through these networks. These markets are absolutely critical of financial stability of the entire ecosystem. We're all tied together. This is not a kind of Silicon Valley business where you say, yeah, fail fast. It's got to work extremely well. It's highly regulated. You got to make sure we're compliant. It has to be 100% resilient under every scenario. So it's going to take time.